Okay, so this is the outer part is the cage, and that is where the chicks are going to live once they're hatched. This particular cage does not hold on to this bottom, and so you cannot lift it up like this because it comes off. So when you're carrying it, you need to lift it by the bottom, but it's very easy to remove, which is one of the nice features. Mostly chicks will not be able to jump out of this height of thing, so one of my teacher friends that helped me set up the kits, she said, I just take the top off and the kids can just gather around it, and then they can all watch them and even pick them up and put them down independently. So that's one nice feature about this. This is the extra box for if you have to clean out the cage or when you bring them back to the farm, just plop them in here. So mostly we're talking about the things for the chicks right now, which will only be the last sort of week of your time with them. This is the water. So fill this with water, screw the tray on nice and tight, flip it over, and it has this airlock thing, so when the chicks drink, a little bit more will come out, and you know, they probably won't drink this all up in maybe a few days. They might, and you might have to refill it, but they will get it messy. So when it's a little bit messy, you take it over to the sink, or the garbage can actually, if it's got shavings in it. You tip it like this, and you sort of wipe everything out, maybe rinse it out, and then put it back like this, and it fills itself up with water again, nice and fresh. And then because this is a very small little space, I didn't want a big feeder, so this is our feeder for now. This is the feed to put in it, and if you fill it right at the beginning, fill it right to the top so that they can see it. They'll be able to reach over. It's the right height for them to reach over. They will climb in it too, and whatever, they make a mess, but you know, they're babies, so we forgive them. And this should be lots. If for some reason you have food left over, which you probably will, you can just throw it back in here. They can come home with that. Okay, so that's feed and water. Now when you're setting this up, the cage top had the lights over here, and then the feed and the water should go at the other end. So they warm up and they sleep over here, but when they want to eat and drink, they run around and they find it over there. It's not very far apart, but it is a difference. You don't want to you don't want the food and the water to be warm, and you don't want them sleeping in it. Like, you just want to separate that. This is the bedding to fill up the bottom of here. So you just dump this in, and it should be fine all week. I expect that one application of bedding, they won't get it super wet. Maybe right under the water where it could get a little wet, so you can just scoop that part out and then spread the rest out. These are the posters and the instructions. So just things you might want to know, how you can tell if your chicks are warm enough, things about the incubator. Then I have French posters and English posters. And then this is the instructions that come with the incubator. Realistically, I don't think you'll have to read and understand all these instructions. Most of it is just automatically programmed. This is mostly for, like, if you would want to hatch duck eggs, or if you... Here's the incubator. I am just going to ask if you can make sure to keep all the packaging and make sure it comes back the way it was, because I will want to do that over and over for people. Here's the power cord for turning it on. And here's the incubator itself. So this comes apart into a couple of pieces. This top part is the part that's going to make the heat. It's going to be the programmable part. And then here's where the eggs are going to sit. This little tray is, each one of them can hold one of the eggs. The eggs are going to lie down in there on their sides. And this just covers up the little water pot for when the chicks actually hatch and are running around in here. You don't want them to, I don't think they could fit, but you don't want them to be able to get into the water. So you're going to lay your eggs down just on their sides like this, nice and comfortable. The machine is going to do all the turning work for you. It has an automatic setting where it spins them about, it rotates them like this. And then you can see they just do a little turn, and it works like magic. It's kind of way too easy, actually. So this will be on top of it. You'll plug it in. There's only one adjustment that has to be made, and that is to set the number of days. I'm not going to actually explain that right this moment, but it's written out in your instructions. You just press 2 or 3 buttons, and it sets the number of days. So it takes 21 days for these eggs to hatch. Once they are 2 days away from hatching, the turning will automatically stop if it's programmed. If it's not programmed, no big deal. You could just stop the turning manually, and then when it's time for the hatch, you're going to take out this part. So you'll have to carefully set your eggs aside. Take this part out, and you're going to put in this little guy here, which is your hatch mat. It's just a nice place for the chicks not to be slippery, and they make a little mess when they come out of their eggs, and you put your eggs back on here, and that way when they're done hatching, you can take out the eggshells, take this guy out, and toss it in the garbage. So now the water, this goes like that. This is the water fill. So inside here, and this will be pretty hard to see from far away, but inside here there's a tiny little marking, a ledge, and you're going to, before the hatch, like for the first 19 days, you're going to fill this little pot so that it never gets empty, but it never fills over top of that little ledge, the little marker. Just keep it underneath there and just never let it dry up. It's very simple, and that by siphon action will keep enough in here in one side of this little water pot to keep the right humidity for the first 19 days. For the hatch, you need it more humid. And so they've made a nifty little device. If you fill it up to the top, then the siphon will automatically overflow in here and fill both sides of the water pot, raises your humidity, and then everything's nice and wet in there for the babies to move around. When you're looking at your eggs starting to hatch, the little chicks will make a tiny hole, and maybe for 6 hours it'll just be a tiny little hole, and you'll be freaking out, and your cortisol levels are going to go up, and you're gonna think, is it okay? And then eventually it will start to move, and it will make a crack most of the way around, and then it will push with its feet and pop open. But what you're looking for during that time to see if your incubator humidity is high enough is, are the little membranes inside, you know how when you do a hard-boiled egg you have the shell and then there's that skin? Okay, so is that skin a little bit floppy in the hole you can see? Because it needs to be a little floppy, it should not look papery. If it looks like parchment paper, maybe it's not wet enough in here, and you might need to top it up a little bit more, but pretty well the automatic workings should take care of that for you. The other way to keep the humidity nice and high during your hatch is to make sure not to open it too often. So I have pretty detailed instructions about that in here, but you can't open it every single time there's a chick. You have to leave them in there until they're nice and dry, and there's 2 or 3 of them, and then you get a partner, and someone picks it up, the other person quickly takes out the chicks, and then you just quickly put it back down. So then it always doesn't dry out too much, it doesn't cool down too much, and those other little guys that are still working on their shells, they have to be able to move around in there and not dry out. And so that's kind of the other trick to making that part work. Now let's take a look at the candler. This little guy here, it's not going to be too obvious. With the room lights on, I find that it's not quite bright enough, but it is like a little flashlight, and you put it under the egg like this, and you put it over the egg like this. The eggs have a top and a bottom. The fat part is the top, and the skinny part is the bottom, and the fat part almost always has the air bubble, and that's why we never turn it upside down. If you turn your egg upside down, your air bubble is at the bottom, which is not the best place for air bubbles, right? Because that makes them move, or it could possibly make them pop, which it's never happened to me, but you're not supposed to do that. So if you want a candle from the top, you put it up here and move it around like that. From the bottom, you go like this. When you're handling eggs that are nice and warm and they've got a living being inside them, you just make sure not to jiggle, not to shake, not to drop, obviously, and make sure your hands are clean. So if you're going to be showing kids, you just wash your hands first, because you don't want the oils from your skin to clog the pores in here. The chicks are breathing through the shell the whole time they're growing, and so you don't want the pores to get all clogged up with your skin oils or dirt or whatever. You want them to, so you can candle them every day if you want, but just make sure your hands are clean and make sure they don't get jostled or turned upside down. And then you can show the kids what's going on inside there, and hopefully it looks a lot like the posters show what the should be going on inside the eggs. And you know, sometimes there's one of them or two of them that doesn't develop anything. That's just kind of a fact of life. It is not a necessity for like doing any, like it doesn't do anything for the eggs. It's just an educational thing.
So you can see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't candle for the first like 1 or 2 days. At that point, there's just this very fragile network of blood vessels that's forming, and it's just better to not pick them up and move them and disturb them. But after a couple days, you know, everything's getting going in there, and it's perfectly fine to move them around. They're being moved around all the time inside here anyway, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
it's totally fine. Now, one thing I should say is there's only room for 7 eggs, and I'm giving you 8 on purpose. First of all, it's possible one of them gets a little crack in it, and you don't even want to try to incubate that. But the other thing I encourage everyone to do, and most people say, "Ooh, no, I would never do that," is crack one of them open, put 7 in, start it up, and crack one of them open right in front of the kids. And if you're really, you know, this is what I would do. I would eat it. Now, you probably don't have a place to cook. Maybe you have a microwave.
Right.
I would scramble it up and eat it, because it is the perfect demonstration to the kids that this is just an egg that, like, we eat these eggs for breakfast every day.
Right.
But put them in the heat, they turn into a little chick, and it's the most incredible thing. I mean, it's mind-blowing, right? And so that's one way to blow their little minds, is to crack it open, and even if they just look at it, fine, you don't eat it. That's fine. They'll just see. It just looks like the eggs that you have for breakfast. But if you actually eat it, that demonstrates to them, these are just eggs, kids. It's not any kind of special thing that we got from some special chicken somewhere. These are just normal chicken eggs. So they shouldn't be in there for 24 hours
In that little thing.
in the thing,
Right.
without taking them out. They're fine. They're not going to die from heat or dehydration or lack of food, because the way the yolk is designed to they actually carry the whole yolk inside their body when they hatch,
Yeah.
and that feeds them for 2 or 3 days. Like,
Okay.
it's a really marvelous little design, because if a mother hen is sitting on her nest, she will have to wait there until all her chicks hatch.
So do those eggs stay room temperature?
Yes, yeah. Do
Okay.
not leave them out in the car, and don't let
Okay.
them get warm, and don't put them in the fridge. How do you tell if your chicks are warm enough? Too warm, too cold, just right. And so you can plug both of these in. One of them is an actual 60-watt bulb,
Okay.
and one of them is a ceramic heater.
Okay.
The one with the ceramic heater, I have a little piece of tape over the flip switch, because there's no light. You can't tell whether it's
Okay.
on. So I just have it on, and it has a little tape over it, says leave it on.
Moved on.
You plug it in, it heats itself, it's no problem. They both give about the same amount of heat, but only the bulb gives light. You kind of just have to see. At the beginning, I don't think they'll be too warm, but then as they grow and get more active, then they don't need as much warmth. So you kind of just have to judge based on their behavior. If they are a little bit noisy and they're sort of crowding under, and they're spending all their time right here, they're not warm enough.
Okay.
And so then we would try lowering the light, so you could take the clamp and lower it down 1 or 2 bars.